Good day, colleagues.
Good day.
And I want to thank you once again for choosing UNISA as the institution of your choice. Colleagues, I just want to remind you that the vision of UNISA is an African university shaping futures in the service of humanity. And that is why we, as your academics, are committed to live up the values and the goals and the beliefs enshrined in our vision. Colleagues, we care about you. That is why we are here, really. We care about you, we know you. And being the B.Ed honors students, we know that our students are so diverse in terms of age, in terms of race, in terms of abilities. Therefore, we've invited you here to this seminar or to this presentation so that we could be of assistance to you, colleagues. And at the outset, I also want to say to you that most of our students studying towards the B.Ed Honours program are adults, and you are very different from the traditional younger students. And we are mindful of this here, because we know that, as was mentioned by our previous speakers, that many of you have other commitments, jobs, commitments, family commitments, and so forth. So we know, your needs, and we are here to address your needs, colleagues. Right. And secondly, if we are to compare the way adults learn, that's you, right? You learn differently from the way the traditional younger generation students learn. Because why? It's because you have richer life experiences. Am I right? Yes. Your experiences are so rich, and therefore, at honors level, we want you to draw on your own experiences. When you are writing, when you are communicating, when you are answering questions. And this is this is the way we're going to help you or support you on how to integrate your life experiences in your responses, colleagues. Right. So I think that was the introduction that was my introduction to say that we care about you. We want to ensure that you stay in the system, that you do not feel overwhelmed and feel that you want to give up. Right. That is why we are here to support you so that you can complete your qualification and pursue your masters thereafter. All right. Let's give yourself a clap. Colleagues, the outline of my presentation, I think being the last presenter, I am more or less going to summarize what the other presenters have said, all right? And you will be able to relate to my presentation by drawing on what the other presenters have said. So my presentation is not going to be very long. This is the outline of my presentation. Some common errors encountered by many honors students. The NQF level descriptors for honors, I will just briefly go through it again because Prof. Mahano has went through that in detail. So I think it's good to kind of conclude with the NQF level descriptors as well, right? And some strategies to approach your questions. Right. Now, look at this here, colleagues. How many of you can relate to this question here? Why did I get such low marks, even though I put in so much of effort in my studies? Hey? Is it familiar to you? Yes. Right. And look at the professor's response. Your questions were not answered. Your answers were irrelevant. You did not understand the questions. You reproduced the information in the text, which is plagiarism. Yeah. Right, colleagues. Now, today, that's why we are here, to take you out of that pit. Because if you don't understand your questions, and the lack of understanding of questions can result in you falling into a pitfall, right? And result in your failure. So that's why we are here, to take you out of the pit and to make you succeed in your studies. Colleagues, now, I think by now, The word level descriptors is quite familiar to you. NQF levels, you are at honors level now, eh? Prof. Makano mentioned that. Right, colleagues, and she also mentioned SAQA, South African Qualifications Authority, right? That's where we get our outcomes from. You'll find that a qualification, like a B.Ed honors, have got exit level outcomes. It was mentioned by previous speakers. Now that's where we get our exit level outcomes from. So the NQF levels, it describes the extent or the level of your learning achievement. Right. And it also guides us on what to assess and what you need to know. So as you all know, the NQF level for honors is NQF level 8. The previous qualification, your degree, was NQF level 7. And your diploma is NQF level 6. So it goes on like that, right? So when you complete your masters now, you go on to NQF level 9. Goes on, okay? So your level descriptors, it includes 10 competencies. And these 10 competencies were highlighted by Prof. Makano in the introduction. Just to go through it again, not to go through it, but just to give you an overview of the 10 competencies, colleagues. Right? You will get this presentation, so I'm not going to go through this in detail. But what I want to highlight here is the scope of knowledge at NQF level 8. You'll find that at honors level, you will not be responding to the questions in the same manner that you responded to your questions in your degree and in your diploma. It's going to be at a higher level because the scope of knowledge demands a higher level of cognition, of learning achievement, okay? Therefore, you'll find that even your exam papers are going to, your questions are going to be different, which is going to require you to have a different response as well. Right. Now, if you look at scope of knowledge, for example, just to mention this here, remember that what Prof. Makano mentioned, application of theories, in-depth knowledge within your field of study or your discipline, discipline of practice, and all these kind of things. Then we go on to knowledge of literacy. All right. So these are the 10 core competencies, colleagues. If you achieve these 10 core competencies, then we say that you have achieved your graduate attributes. Now these 10 competencies, colleagues, it is also based on international comparability. You know what this means? That if you complete your honors here, if you go to another university, or even if you complete half your honors here, if you go to another university, they must be willing to take you on because it's based on the NQF levels of SAQA. Right? International comparability and national comparability. Okay. So these 10 competencies will guide the way or your approach to the way you are going to respond to your questions. And what I like here is, one of those competencies that stood out for me is application to, I think it's this one here, the context and system, colleagues. So the knowledge that you gain, it's this one here, the knowledge that you gain here, you must be able to apply it to varied contexts and systems, which means that you must draw on your own work that you are doing, occupational work, academic work. Academic work means you're drawing on from relevant literature, right? And even from your practice, even you need to draw on from varied context. Not only a given context, apply your knowledge to varied context, because you will be working in varied context, not only in South African context, even in global context, right? So these are some of the NQF competencies. Colleagues, this is just a revision as well. You went through this year, Bloom's taxonomy. Professor Ferreira went through this Bloom's taxonomy. It's quite familiar to you. You are also using Bloom's taxonomy in your own practice in your classroom. Am I right? Yes. Right? In setting different types of questions for your learners. So it's not something very strange or new to you. All right. Now, colleagues, what I want to highlight is at UNISA, right, we want a structure to show that there is some kind of coherence or development in the qualifications. The higher the qualifications go, the higher the levels, the allocation of cognitive levels should be in the exam paper. So what you should be expecting in your exam paper is this kind of distribution of questions, all right, at NQF level 8. So when you are looking at your exam paper, you should be expecting 10% of questions from levels 1 and 2. Only 10%, okay? You should be expecting 40% of questions from levels 3 and 4. 40% of questions. And 50% of questions from level 5 and 6. Which means that at NQF level 8, the distribution of questions compared to your degree exams and your diploma exams is going to be different from, right? Because you are going to be tested more on middle and higher order questions. Okay, that is very important for you to know. And as I said to you earlier on, we're looking at the abilities of all students, we're looking at chances for success. So if you look at this allocation, colleagues, look how fair we are. Let me explain to you how fair we are. Our concern is student throughput and student retention, meaning that we want our students, we want all of you here to complete your qualification and not to drop out. So if you look at 40 and 10, the lower and the middle order questions, if the students can answer this and these questions, and even not be able to answer these questions here, you have a chance to pass. Can you see? This is very, very fair practice to students, because that is one of the reasons why we've got this kind of distribution. All right? Now, look at examples of questions. These are some examples of questions, colleagues. Right? Every question has task words. And these task words are the verbs. They're action words that tells you what you must do. And the task words are words like explain, describe, discuss, evaluate, identify, demonstrate, and so on. The task word describes what is expected of you. All right? And these words can come at the end of the question or as first words in itself in the question. Now look at this example here. Play in the early years contribute to the holistic development of the child. Colleagues, I will be sharing many examples based on early childhood development, okay? Because that's my area of specialization. Right. Play in the early years contribute to the holistic development of the child. Discuss. So discuss is after the quotation. The next example. Discuss the role of play in the holistic development of the child. Can you see now? So the task word can come either at the end of your question or it can come at the beginning of the question. All right. Now, let's look at some strategies. Remember, in my earlier introduction, I mentioned to you that lack of understanding of the question is one of the major pitfalls for students' failure. All right? Now let us try to look at strategies that's going to help us to understand the question. All right? Read the question carefully. Underline or highlight the most important words or phrases in the question to help you stay focused. Right? And then you need to break down your question. Look at this example here. Right? This is an example of the question on my left. Children's literature can contribute to the holistic development of the child. That's a statement. Can you see? Now there goes the question. Discuss to what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement with specific reference to the social and moral development of the child. Can you see that this question is loaded? It's got many parts to it. So what we need to do now is we need to identify the task word. And next we need to break down the question so that we answer every part of the question. Right? So you break the question and you work out what you really need to do. In this case, discuss. Firstly, look at discuss. Isn't that so?
Yes.
You need to look at discuss. And Prof. Manieka gave you strategies on what it means when you discuss. You describe first, you identify the characteristics, and you discuss the relevance of the characteristics and so forth. Then discuss requires a different response than that of argue. Can you see? Discuss now, it requires a different response to that of argue. It requires a different response to that of identify. It requires a different response to that of list. Okay? The key word determines what your answer should be. You might be asked to evaluate, describe, or discuss. Okay? Now, let's look at next. Next is the subject or the stimulus. And I think this is what is important. When you get a question like this here, what you need to do is think about where did this question come out, or where is the content of this question covered in your study guide? Think of that. Is it in Learning Unit 2? Is it at the beginning or at the end? Right? You draw the relevance. You make a connection to what you have learned. Now this is exactly what Prof. Mahano mentioned. Do not regurgitate what's in your textbook or in your study guide. You know that the information is there. Now you need to discuss certain aspects. You use that part of your study guide, knowledge that you've learned, the factual knowledge that Prof. Ferreira mentioned, the factual knowledge. You take that factual knowledge now and you're going to discuss that with specific reference to social and moral development. You see now where I'm going to. You use that information as a basis, but your discussion is coming up now. Alright? Your discussion is based on your interpretation, using examples of children's literature and so forth. Now when you discuss with evidence. And what is your evidence? Where do you get evidence from? Colleagues, where do you get evidence from? From your sources? From your literature? Where else? From your examples? From your own practice? From your own practice, what you are practicing in your classroom? Now it's time for you to start writing it out now and give to your examiner to say that in my own classroom practice, this is what I have observed, and you go on telling your little story there. Right? You're giving that little story to support what you have mentioned or stated. You see now? So this is what we talk about substantiating your argument or discussing. Alright? Next. Yes. Your discussion should reflect children's literature in promoting or not promoting social and moral development. You need to agree. You need to state whether you agree or disagree. Isn't that so? And then you need to give your evidence. There's example 2, colleagues. This is an example 2, another example. Using the information from chapter 7 and 8 on emotional intelligence, give your own example that illustrates at least 3 of the author's main concepts. This is another example that I want you to look at. Remember, first we need to look at the task word. Now, you'll notice that up to the first comma, it tells you what chapters information you need to apply your answer to. Isn't that so?
Yes.
And thereafter, you need to give your own example, not the ones that's in your study guide. So you'll be scored on that. If you give the examples that's in your study guide, you will not be given a score, right? And the last part of your question says that the last part dictates what the example needs to have. It needs to have at least 3 or more concepts from those chapters. You see now, this example is helping you to break down your question so that you are able to answer every part of your question and not leave out any section of the question. Okay? Now, we also look at content words. When you get a question, colleagues, you need to draw or make a connection with the content in your study guide. That's what we mentioned, right? And also look at limiting words. Limiting words are, if they say, give 3 examples, you must give 3 examples, not 2, not 10. If you're giving 10, you're wasting all the time writing the 10 examples, and which is going to reduce your time to answer your other questions. All right? So limiting words, look at that. It's very helpful. Now, identifying keywords, I think we've discussed this, where you identify the keywords and understand what the keyword expects of you. Once you have identified the keywords, and once you understood the question, now it's time for you to structure your response. This is a very, very important part of writing your answer. Colleagues, an important tip is, say for example, you know that this question is coming from Learning Unit 2.5 that talks about the holistic development of the child through children's literature. You've learned the whole section. So quickly jot down some important points. And now you go back to the question to see what exactly does your question need you to do. All right? So you start writing by answering your given question. And this is what you'll say now. Start the essay by rephrasing the question in the form of a statement. Look at this example here. This question is, should the FIFA World Cup be awarded to countries with human rights violation? That is a question that's given to you. Now, we are suggesting to you, start answering your question by restating the statement. Because then it shows the examiner that you are really answering the question that's supposed to be answered. So you now say, countries with human rights violation should not be awarded the FIFA World Cup because this rewards a nation's poor treatment of its citizens. Can you see? Now this becomes your statement, your thesis statement. And now all that follows thereafter is going to be evidence to support your main statement. And your evidence is going to, by evidence I mean, drawing on from multiple sources of literature. Remember that Prof. Bahana, which you mentioned when she spoke about the NQF levels. One is multiple sources of information. At honors level, you must be able to draw on multiple sources of information to make a point. To show the examiner what position you are taking. All right? And then, then now it's about writing out your answer. Colleagues, as far as possible, please try to use correct grammar, correct punctuation, correct spelling. Right? Because this creates an impression with your examiner. Don't feel that, no, I will come later and I'll correct it. There may not be time for you to come later and correct it. So do it as you're writing. All right? Make sure that you're thinking about your sentence. Write in a manner that the examiner can understand your point. Write simply, colleagues. Don't memorize. Because when you memorize, you find that you have a tendency to use language that's not your language. And it's more difficult to memorize them, isn't that so? So try to understand what you are writing. Try to understand what you are learning. Put it down in your own simple words and simple language. You will go a long way. Alright? Do not think that you can impress the examiner with words, big words that you don't understand. It's going to result in your failure. Really. Okay. Right. Then, managing time, which was also discussed. Colleagues, how do you manage your time? If your question, your exam paper is out of 60 marks, if you got 3 questions, you can distribute it out of 20, 20, 20, isn't that so? But that's not always the case. A better guide is to look at the weighting of the questions. One question may be out of 10 marks. Another question may carry 50 marks. So look at where your weighting or which question is heavily weighted. Because then it is much more, it means that that question is much more significant in terms of making you pass. All right? Stay focused, colleagues. You know what? Sometimes as you may write, you might find that you are losing focus. You are derailing. So what you need to do is stop, go back, read your question, review what you have written, and get that on track. Right? If you feel that you're losing focus, go back to your notes that you have jotted, where those ideas came up, and see if you've covered all those important points, and then go start writing again. Okay, stay focused, answer the question. Colleagues, in conclusion, I want to say to you that whatever you do, do it well.
Yes.
And may success attend your efforts. Thank you, colleagues.
Sure.